we are live. So just wait for a while and then I will start. So, all right. So, guys, it's 8 p.m. So I probably gonna just hang around like for a couple of minutes so people can start coming in. We have about like 10 people now, so we just wait for a few minutes and I will start doing the intro. And the speaker is ready, and it's prepared with the video and slide everything. So just prepare your Q&A. Just post the comment, and then we just pick questions and then we're gonna post it on later on. So all right. Okay. So yeah, meanwhile you're gonna have to stare at my face for a while. Okay, I'm gonna start do the intro now. So I think we have about like 15 people to 20 people now. So I'm just gonna intro. People start coming later by then. So this will be the first meetup we're having for the year. Like thanks to the MCO, no longer gonna have like physical meetup. I know some people still do physical meetup, but I don't think it's personally I don't find it's a good thing to do at the moment. Like at least until the end of the year, and probably like figure out later down the road. Uh, but again, online is there, it's free, you can stay for home, but you just won't be focusing because you just probably distracted with TV or your kid, or you just eating something, eating and watching it like a movie or something, right? And we will appreciate if you have any feedback. Just let us know, and then just can drop a message in the meetup, and we will just look at it and address anything. So if you are interested to be a speaker, just drop a message as well. We look into it as well. We probably like set it up proper like submission for speaker, everything later down the road. Probably like couple, I don't know, 1 month or 2 months. And it's not only me. So its main person is actually Yongsheng. So I'm gonna intro her. So Yongsheng is the main Flutter girl, and she's like all out with Flutter. So Yongsheng, intro yourself. I'm gonna give you. I mean, just keep a few minutes.
Okay. Hi everyone. So I'm Yongshen. I'm a Flutter developer. I post a lot of things about Flutter nowadays because Flutter is getting the hype, and then I'm just joining the stream. And then you if you search for my name, you can find me on Medium. You can find me hosting a lot of stuff and events. Yeah, so I also organize like Flutter study groups online. Now we have a weekly learning session on every Saturday lah. So if you are interested to join on the learning journey of Flutter, then can come and approach me. Yeah. So back to you, Tevin.
All right. So basically, you can find a name, Google it, so you figure out all the biodata, everything. But probably not going to be a WhatsApp number or what. So don't worry. So, but if you ask her, then she probably give you a WhatsApp number. And I know everyone's taking now Flutter, so I'm just helping out like here and there, and try to get this up and running. And probably like this, I don't know how it's going to be. So it's all based on your feedback, everything. And it's 8:00. We have 1 more minute to 8:05, and then I will intro the speaker, and then we can start from there. Meanwhile, I'm just gonna ramble a bit more. And I mean, the reason is Flutter is particularly I'm interested in is it's like another the UI everything, right? So have a special place. Like I was trying out like a couple of years ago, like 1 year ago, like something. I tried out with Flutter first, and and it was quite easy to pick up and do it lah, just the language only. So that's the reason. Like, but I don't have any time to do actually work fully of Flutter anymore. So okay, so 805, I'm gonna into the speaker. His name is Jason Choo. He's a tech lead. He's from Singapore. So this is a good thing about online, right? You can invite anyone from anywhere of the world. So if you have a request for any speaker that you want to know about more about Flutter from around the world, let us know the name. We try to reach out to them. Probably they're interested, and we can do something work out something. And he worked at pslove, so it's a very interesting company. So I have a lot of questions on that company name. And he will talk about the current trends of Flutter, the comparison with Flutter and other framework. He will showcase some couple of like various app, web, and mobile platform as well. And he also will tell what's the bad thing about Flutter and what you cannot do Flutter in production. So there's the thing about Flutter is it's still new, right? So there's some stuff that you can't still uh do it with Flutter compared to other language, especially like native. So if you have any question again, please drop in the comment, and we're happy to like answer it. And if it's a good question lah. If it's not related, I'm probably just gonna ignore it lah. So all right, Jason, let's show your face. This is Jason, by the way.
Hello.
Yep. And I'm gonna remove myself and let you carry on this. So
Okay.
and all right, have fun, Jason. And
Okay. Okay, Taiwan. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm actually Jason from pslove. Let me actually share my screen. Is you okay able to see the screen? Okay. So right now, I actually will do a share. Give me a moment. Let me do a preparation. Okay. So as what Taiwan had mentioned, like Flutter is actually quite new. So for me, I actually want to share something that I've been used Flutter for almost 2 years. So actually, I use it in productions for my company. So we're actually quite an early adopter for Flutter. So with that, I actually want to share like what are the things that we have been like faced, whether it's good or bad, like to see whether what are the things that what are good things about Flutter, what's the bad thing about Flutter, or in this talk, which is in a nutshell. So this talk is actually very uh, okay. So this talk is actually part of my own medium series where we actually use this to actually like I actually use this to actually like to write my experience about Flutter. So this is actually quite interesting. So if you actually want to learn more about certain like topics about Flutter, do actually follow me on the Medium post. Okay, so today I want to share is actually three things. One is actually a Flutter in a nutshell. So I will actually share a more overview, a very broad base, what Flutter from like 2 or 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and also I will show some demo apps in actions. So I also want to share things that you can do and you cannot do in productions. So a bit myself, I actually come from a company called pslove, but this year, recently we actually rebrand ourselves to name Blood. So this is actually a company that actually do for what I've been joining them for 2 years, and they also one of the early adopters for Flutter. And so throughout my actually so prior to pslove, I actually I actually help out in different startups that actually do like different development in also in other language which I'll share in the next point. So for many like over 10 years, I actually do different kind of framework. So like from a very early days of like a pure HTML, CSS, all the way to like nowadays where they call it a Web 3.0, where there's a more like more easier framework that actually help to improve the developers' productivity. So what is Blood or pslove previously? So Blood is actually a regional fintech startup. It's founded 2014. So we're actually focusing on a feminine kind of products that actually empowered through technology. So we actually have three kinds of product. The first product is actually a kind of like a heat patch for female to actually relieve their pain during their periods. The second product is actually our digital product, which is the period tracker on the right. And this is actually built in Flutter. So it's 100% in Flutter. And the third products that we actually just launched, which is a Metro Cup. As you can see, the brand and the logo is actually changed. So this is actually what, in a nutshell, what Blood pslove is about. So Bright is actually quite an early adopter for Flutter, and we actually use Firebase for backend. So this is actually what I call we are number one fan in Southeast Asia lah. So we're one of the startup company that actually use Flutter since the very late, very early alpha stage of Flutter. So let's go in depth on what is Flutter in a nutshell. So let me do a kind of video to actually give you a summary that actually created by Flutter team itself.
Mobile users expect their apps to have beautiful designs, smooth animations, and great performance. To deliver on this, developers need to create new features faster than ever without compromising on quality or performance. That's why we built Flutter. Flutter is Google's mobile UI framework that provides a fast and expressive way for developers to build native apps on both iOS and Android. This is because apps and interfaces made with Flutter are built from a single codebase, compiled directly to native ARM code, use the GPU, and can access platform APIs and services. Here are 3 ways that Flutter will help you on day 1. Flutter is engineered for high developer velocity. Stateful hot reload allows you to change your code and see it come to life in less than a second without losing the state of the app. Flutter also ships with a rich set of customizable widgets, all built from our modern reactive framework. Plus, Flutter integrates with popular development tools, which means you can get started quickly with the editor or IDE you already know and love. Flutter moves the widgets, rendering, animation, and gestures into the framework to give you complete control over every pixel on the screen. This means you have flexibility to build custom designs. Flutter apps follow platform conventions and interface details, such as scrolling, navigation, icons, fonts, and more. This is why apps built with Flutter are featured on both the App Store and Google Play Store. Flutter is great for developers both new and experienced in mobile. If you're new to mobile, Flutter gives you a fast, fun, and modern way to deliver native apps. If you're an experienced mobile developer, you can add Flutter to your existing workflows and tools to build new expressive UIs. Flutter is free and open source and used by developers and organizations around the world, including enterprise, agencies, and startups. Visit flutter.io to get started today. We can't wait to see what you build.
Right. So this is the quick video of what is Flutter. So at the end of the day, this is the Flutter. Actually, what the purpose of Flutter is actually trying to create a kind of like beautiful and fast and high performance cross-platform application using a single code base. So you can actually deploy not just in iOS, Android, also to web, to desktop, and to other similar devices. So this is actually what Flutter is about. So who is using Flutter like around the world? So beside my company Blood, Google itself themselves use Flutter for their products. So there are also other companies like Grab, Alibaba around the world actually use Flutter for their production app. Of course, not to all their application, but more of their more recent newer app that actually require for iOS, Android, and web. They actually use Flutter for their production app. So for Google itself, they actually use Flutter. They actually use Flutter to build products like Google Home Hub. They also use to create the mobile version of the Google apps, and also the more of the in products that they are created, which is Stadia, which is kind of like cloud gaming for they just use any device, any devices that actually just plug into their Chromecast and you can actually play a cloud game without the need to install anything. So it is actually what they built using Flutter. So the technology that they use is that means their web application is built in Flutter. So in terms of Flutter, in terms of the trend, like throughout like so far, because Flutter is actually started quite as early as around 2017, 2016, 2017. So that time there's no much traction, but as you reach around 2018, 2019, there's actually a spike in the tractions around the world. As you can see on the trend based on the GitHub, the state of the octopus, they actually found out that Dart and Flutter actually become one of the fastest growing languages and projects around the world, and the number of likes in their GitHub is actually quite amazing. So for back to current year 2020, the similar kind of like survey that's done by Stack Overflow, So similarly, like there's actually in terms of the survey, like Flutter is still remain one of the popular projects. So it's kind of like interesting that there's actually a growing trend. It's quite interesting that the trend move actually faster than other framework that has been established for many years. So for pslove or Blood, we actually started building our app as early as around early 2018 before Flutter became production ready, or they declare version 1.0. So we have been like building it since their beta or late alpha stage. I mean, during that stage, there's a lot of issues, but having said that, we actually managed to launch our iOS and Android app. So as you can see, this is actually a kind of like the GitHub number of stars that actually trend from the start of the repo to the current stage. You can see that there's actually a spike from 2018 when the Flutter is being declared as a beta kind of stage, and a lot of developers start to realize and build and try it out. And when it reached 1.0 at the end of 2019, you actually saw a kind of like a very steady growth around the world that has been adopted for their building their mobile apps. So according to the LinkedIn data, they actually say that Flutter has become one of the fastest growing skill among software engineers. So this is amazing that the Flutter has been growing, have been become one of the important skills for software development. So if we talk about against the more de facto or the most popular framework, which is what you have seen like React and React Native, so you can see that Flutter has been like within like about maybe 3 to 4 years, they actually start to you have overtaken like React Native repo already. So you can see that there's actually a growing trend that that Flutter has become more and more popular. Of course, if you compare to React or React Native, the majority of the application in the world is still either native or they actually built on React or React Native. So in terms of Flutter, how ready is it for cross-platform to be developed? So usually what I actually break down into different parts, which is mobile, web, desktop, and embedded, and also wearable. So for the mobile version of the Flutter, it's actually quite stable already. So a lot of companies have been using has been using Flutter for their iOS and Android app. So with that, then if your customer or you are trying to build a project or app that actually serve majority of them use iOS or Android, then of course Flutter is actually quite good for this kind of use case. You can actually use one code base and can deploy for other you can deploy for iOS and Android. Of course, using the same code base, as more and more framework is ready for production, you can actually use the same code base and you can deploy to web, desktop, and also to embedded devices in the future. But right now, the only thing that is actually ready for production, if you actually don't mind about certain bugs that we are facing, like for example in Flutter Web, it's still in beta, but it's actually quite good in terms of the most of the use case can be handled by the Flutter Web in beta. So to be, in my opinions, iOS, Android, and web is actually quite ready for productions. It can actually roll out. In fact, in my current company, we actually use iOS, Android, and web for Flutter. So later I'll show you more on like a demo on how this is being used. So let me do a comparison. Like I think most of you may be interested, like what is the difference like between frameworks. So I'll actually pick to actually compare in terms of few parameters. So the main things that I'll actually will compare is like later I will actually have different slides for like a mobile, compare just for mobile, also compare between just for web and also just for desktop framework, and lastly the cross platform. So right now, let me show you what is the comparison between mobile framework. As you can see, React Native is actually quite a more popular framework, not just because have been around for some time, but because of the easiness. If let's say if you actually come from web development and you're very quite familiar with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, So if you move to React Native, it's actually quite convenient because you already know the language and you already familiarize those syntax. So it's easier for you to actually pick up and learn and build the iOS Android. So, but if you compare to that, I think the downside, I think for that is that for Flutter is that you have to learn a new language, which is Dart. So Dart is like Java, Python, JavaScript kind of like combination, which they have their own kind of syntax. But if you actually if you are developers, you have been learning other framework, there's actually a documentation in Flutter website that actually like give you kind of like bridging, like if you are from React Native, how do you bridge your knowledge from React Native to Flutter. So they actually have some documentation on that. You can check out with that. So this is to help you to fasten the learning curve of learning a new framework or a new language. So I think the key thing about this is that if you actually, most of the time people prefer framework like React Native or Flutter because of the development time. Because if you actually want to build iOS and Android natively, yeah, I think you need to learn both languages separately, and it's kind of like two code base, and you need to actually spend a lot of time trying to maintain, especially when you want to have a uniform UI, same UI for iOS and Android, then you need to actually code twice in the two different language. So using like a framework like Flutter or React Native, they will give you a kind of like coding once, and you can deploy for both. So I think the downside for Flutter mobile, I think the key thing is actually quite early. So the adoption by third-party services such as like maybe like maybe you integrate a third party, like let me see, maybe like if you want to integrate maybe a third party that is maybe Stripe. So Stripe in the past when we actually develop iOS Android, they don't have nobody actually have a package for Stripe for iOS and Android that is actually can actually use it in your mobile app. So in the past it's very hard. So nowadays, there's actually a community actually built the package for Stripe so that people can actually integrate together. But of course, you will need some time for community or the third-party services to develop kind of like the integration packages that actually integrate with Flutter natively. So for most of the use case, for example, React Native, I think most of the third-party services, Stripe or maybe Google Apps or those things, they actually have a kind of like SDK or software development kit that is actually built for React Native or React. So with that, then there's the integration will be more seamless. It's easier to integrate those third-party services. So I think in terms of Flutter, there's actually quite a key limitations on that. So if you have any third-party services that they don't have a Flutter, most likely they don't have a Flutter SDK, but you need to integrate. There's only one or two choice. One is you build a package for that services and you can upload to the package repository and you can share it to the open source lah. Or secondly is you have to wait for the official like the third-party services to provide a SDK for Flutter, which I think will take very long time. So there's actually what a downside for Flutter. And but for why Google actually developed Flutter, you may actually realize that why not like the React is actually quite good enough. I think the main thing that actually why Flutter actually appeared at this time around, I think the main thing is because React Native has actually one key limitation. I myself actually came from React Native. I actually started from React Native because I've been coding for web for quite a long time. So moving to React Native is actually kind of I mean, it's convenient lah because I already know HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So moving to React Native is actually more like easier to pick up. So with that, I think the key things actually what I'm trying to say is the performance of React Native when you actually use it in production at a very high volume, like you can take a volume like Grab, kind of like millions of transactions per second kind of like usage of volume, then the performance will start to see the red light in React Native mobile React Native apps. So that's why like there's some company actually started to move out from React Native, and either they actually move out to another framework, or they start to rebuild into a native iOS Android. So I think it's because that is actually the key thing about React Native is the performance. So uh, so that's actually what the difference between. Of course, this is actually for mobile. Let's go to the next one, which is web. So web, for Flutter web, it's actually quite in beta. So in terms of performance, as they actually declare as beta, so performance will be definitely bad. I mean, it will not be as good as like what React has been around for many years. So obviously, in terms of performance, React will be the optimum kind of thing. And the second thing is actually like I say, the party integration is usually the problem. So later I will share more on the web version, other things that it cannot do. But having said that, you can see the comparison. The key thing is that why companies prefer a kind of React kind of framework or Flutter framework is because of the speed of development and also the cost, because you need a lot of engineers to build a native kind of app. So if you need to support for web, you need one kind of team for that. If you need to support for mobile, you need two teams. One is iOS, one is Android. So that's actually the key thing about the framework, like why people use this kind of framework. Lastly, for desktop, which is one of the interesting comparison, because desktop for all the kind of like cross platform framework is relatively new for it, especially for Flutter and also for React Native. Because React Native for desktop is actually quite new. So right now, as I know, React Native is actually for desktop is actually right now is actually led by Microsoft. Microsoft actually created trying to support for their using React Native for their desktop, especially for Windows and Mac. So they're actually trying to like allow developers to build Windows application and Mac application using React Native. So you can check it out on the online about that. So similarly, Flutter also trying to do that. So right now they are pushing hard to achieve to reach Flutter to a more production. But as of now, it's actually quite in Flutter. So it's not recommend to use it for production. But if you want to try it for your own personal project, your own landing page, that if even it crash, nobody care, then yeah, I mean you can actually try it out for your own personal project. But as for production, desktop is still not ready yet because it's in alpha. But for web iOS Android, I think it's actually good enough to actually use for the production. So lastly, in overall, this is actually a more overview for cross-platform comparison. So all in short, all in all, if you think of the kind of like languages, of course, if you compare to a native where you have to learn so many languages to support like maybe 6 to 7 platform, I think the most of the companies will decide, okay, let's use React or React Native or maybe Flutter in this case, because it's actually better in terms of you actually can develop faster and can have a more uniform UI across different platform. And when you want to do changes, maintenance, I think then you can actually easily change and deploy. Of course, having said that, a cross-platform framework always have a downside, which is always performance. So you will not. I think cross-platform framework will never reach the performance of a native kind of iOS, Android, or web or whatever framework that you are trying to build. I think it's because at the end of the day, it's just another layer between native that is translated from the maybe from Dart or from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and translated into the native language, which is the iOS for iPhone or for Android for like the Kotlin kind of thing. So that is actually what I've been so far experienced, because I've been using React and Flutter and other like native for quite some time. So I actually like compare this thing in the whole more holistic way. Okay, so having said that, let me do some demo on like what you can actually see, like especially for iOS, Android, and web. Let me do a kind of quick demo. I will be switching to another website, which is our company website. Give me a second. Give me a second. Okay, so if you can see this, okay, so this is actually the application that this is actually the website that currently our website. Let me put a bit bigger. Okay, so this is actually the website that we actually built it in Flutter Web, and you can see that this is actually whether you can tell whether this is actually Flutter Web, and the thing is we actually use this kind of same code base that can actually deploy to iOS and Android too. So the good thing about this is that you can actually use this same code base and deploy to iOS and Android. And the thing is, you don't need to actually reconfigure the whole thing. You actually will have a same kind of effect. You also can have same kind of user interface across iOS, Android, and web. And this is actually what the good thing about that. And this is actually coded in pure Flutter web. And of course, there's some workaround that which I will share later, which have done some downside, which if you actually use Flutter web for your website. So having said that, this is actually what the Flutter version, the web version of the Flutter for our website. Okay, so if you want to actually check out, do check out at the getblood.com or pslove.com. You can actually check out that this is actually built in Flutter Web. Okay, so let me show you the second one, which is the second product that we actually have, which also built purely in Flutter Web, in Flutter, which is our peer tracker app. So this is actually our first attempt to use Flutter to actually test out whether Flutter is actually a good framework. So we actually started as early as alpha stage. So this is actually quite interesting that we actually face a lot of problems, but of course we resolve. And also when the Flutter become version 1, stable with this, a lot of things have been resolved. So a lot of performance issue has been resolved, and right now it's actually quite a good performance ready kind of framework. So let me show you a kind of breakdown. So as you can see, this is actually the app. So the features, you can see that the UI is actually quite amazing. You can see that this is actually built in Flutter. It's not built in native iOS or Android. So this is actually built in pure 100% in Flutter in Dart. And you can see that it's hard to tell that this is actually built in Flutter, especially the performance is actually quite amazing. If you want to try it out, you can actually download at the App Store to actually see the kind of like the app in actions. If you want to check it out, so this is actually the Flutter Flutter mobile version. Of course, we can actually deploy this for the web version in the near future. So you can see that once we actually deploy this to let our users use, we actually receive quite a significant feedbacks, and a lot of them like it. And this app is actually done by 3 engineers. There's only 3 engineers or 4 with including intern. So it's 3 full times and 1 or 2 interns at any one time. They actually built this app. I think we spent about 6 months plus to roll out the first version to actually allow iOS and Android. And the next thing that I want to show and demo is like how do you use Flutter with machine learning. So this is actually the app that they actually demo, like which is to recognize the product that just by scanning the camera, just using a camera can actually. So this is actually a kind of a tool that is developed by Google. So how does it work is, let me show you the actual application. So this is actually a website called Digital Machine. So what does this do is they give you a tool by Google. What you need to do is actually upload or to actually fit a number of images that you want to recognize. For example, we want to recognize the various products that actually want to recognize. Like these are the things that actually want to recognize in that. Like if you can recognize like this, actually like let's say you want to recognize these are the 4 products. All you need to do is very simple. Just need to upload the photos that actually correspond to that product. Then once you've done that, you can actually click on train the model. And after maybe about 10 minutes or so, depend how big is your sample size for the images, you will actually have something like this. So let me show you a demo. So you can see on the bottom of his part where they will actually give you whether as you can recognize like how this accurate of this product is. You can see that he actually will start detect, and you can see that this is the product that is being recognized, and this allow you to actually adjust like whether this is a very accurate model that you actually develop. So once you actually done that, once you are satisfied with this uh, like model, like you like this and you see quite accurate, what you can do is actually you can click on this export model, and you can actually export it into like you want to actually use this for your website, or you can use it for your mobile app where you want to use it to embed to actually recognize, like in this case this is the recognized product, and this is actually work well in Flutter as well. So all you need to do is actually download the model and just upload. Either you can actually just embed into the code base and use it right away, and no need to we need to actually download. So this is actually how we can actually use this if you actually need kind of if you actually need to use this for like uh, to have a use case for like machine learning. So if you need to develop an application for machine learning related stuff or use cases, then Flutter is actually quite ready. I mean, the thing is, you have to actually know how to use a bit of TensorFlow, like some kind of configuration. But other than that, once you actually like do a kind of like upload to the code base, you can actually use it right away, and it's actually very simple, and you just need to feed in with the camera feed from Flutter app, and you can actually get the result that you want. So this is actually quite good for integration, and it can actually work well also for web as well, and just need to download the correct kind of model. Okay, so the next demo that I'll show you is the animations. I think the key thing about why people use Flutter is the high performance or high interactive or beautiful UI that Flutter able to develop and also to produce, which is the UI. So Flutter actually partnered with a company called Riff, which they allow a company to actually like use this like you can actually use this kind of framework which is called Riff. So this is the one that actually allow you to actually develop games and high interactive animated web app using Flutter and this technology. So this is actually natively supported for Flutter. Their actually first framework that they support is actually Flutter. So you can see that they're actually quite interesting. We can actually use this to interact and can set like the animation key frame by frame kind of effects, and also to determine like when there's interaction on the Flutter web, like when you click a button, the animation will trigger actions. You will actually maybe you will just wave, you will just trigger a wave on the animation. So this is actually quite good for building kind of a high interactive animated app or even games. So I actually see some companies actually start to use this for games. Of course, you have to make use of you have to actually provide a lot of graphics. So this actually good things about this is that you can actually use this to actually get the. So if you actually like sometimes if you like as if you actually need to have like if you don't have a design background or you need to have certain assets that you want to use, you can actually go to this kind of their kind of like open repository where people actually contribute open source their design, their animated design, and you can actually use this for your Flutter web. So all you need to do is actually download the version of that means the compiled version of the app, and install the package for this integration and just embed. So let me show you a demo for this. So this is actually the Flutter web that we have been built for testing. So you can see, let me show you something like this. So you can see this is actually what I grabbed from the open source repository which people share. So and actually what you can do, you can actually do kind of like you can actually interact with this penguin, and you will move according to what, if you want to have it slow down, or you want to pause it, you can pause it, or you want to have a very interactive kind of animation. You can see that you will change according to what you have changed and interact. So this allow you to actually interact with the animations or the graphics or animations according to the actions in the Flutter app. So let me show you another example. Like you can actually you can see that the house being changed like according to the number of rooms that they have, and this actually is built purely on Flutter and Riff. So this is actually quite interesting projects that I see that like using a very minimum effort, you can get a very high quality app, and you don't need a lot of engineers to actually build that. So this is actually a beauty about Flutter. So this is actually animations that I show. Okay, so this is actually what I show for the Flutter in actions, the different kind of use cases for Flutter, what I can do with Flutter in terms of actions. So right now, let me go more in depth on what are the things that you can do in Flutter. So especially in productions, because as a company or working in company, maybe there's a decision making, like what kind of framework you want to use for your mobile app, for your web. So let me go through some of them that I have experienced in my actual work, which actually can be avoided it can be avoided in productions, that actually can be prevented, because it can be quite painful if you don't realize that these are the things they can do, these are the things you cannot do in Flutter. So let me show you what you can do in Flutter. I think the first thing that Flutter actually can provide is actually responsive design. You actually use framework like Bootstrap, or you actually use other kind of framework for web application. They actually provide this kind of responsive design. But for Flutter, because having Flutter has a cross-platform framework, they have to provide this kind of responsive design inbuilt into the framework, so that it can actually build for multiple devices that have different sizes, have different kind of shapes. And nowadays, there's a new kind of devices like Surface Dual, where they have dual screen, foldable screen. So how do you respond to that kind of design for your mobile app or for your web application? So these are the things that Flutter has been built in to actually support that. So the first thing that I will be sharing is actually kind of like breakpoint. So for breakpoint, it's actually one of the important components of that. You can see, like if you actually need to support for like different screen size, especially where there's an ultra wide monitor, there's a different size of laptop, and even different sizes of mobile app. Then how do you support? Like in terms of decoding wise, it's quite a pain, because you have to do a lot of stuff to support different screen sizes. So this is actually quite troublesome, especially for like if you want to work with designers, where they need to understand like what are the things that actually need to like provide to actually support multiple screen size for different use cases. So the first thing is actually breakpoints, where they have there's actually a existing package that actually do like you can actually break based on the devices, and you respond, your widgets or your UI will respond according to like the size and the width, how much space that is being provided for your screen, and you will respond accordingly. So this is actually quite helpful, especially where your design is actually very complex. You need to actually like make sure that every screen size matters and can actually support, and you will not feel the design will not be broken because of the certain screen size you didn't support. So this point is quite helpful. So the next thing that I will be mentioning is actually aspect ratio. So for aspect ratio, if you actually require like certain images that have a same ratio, then of course you can actually use these inbuilt widgets that actually allow you to actually retain the same size, same ratio, even though there's a change in the width or height of the screen. The next thing that you can do is actually orientation, especially where for mobile, where you will tweak your mobile phone to an orientation, landscape, or portrait, you can actually, so Flutter actually have an inbuilt mechanism to actually support that. What happens if the screen is being treated to a landscape mode, and so the UI will respond accordingly. So in other kind of responsive kind of widgets, Flutter actually provide other kind of widgets that actually help you to support like a layout builder that give you the maximum width based on the size of your devices, and it'll give you the width. Then you can respond accordingly to whether do you need to show this in a desktop or do you need to show this in your mobile app. Okay, so there's other things you can actually see that like one of the things that if you actually need to do some kind of customized like responsive design, they actually have a kind of like custom single child layout where you can actually design how you want to respond. If let's say in this UI you have a lot of images, like how do you manipulate? Let's say there's a lot of spaces. Do you want to show different sizes for images? So you can use this kind of widget to actually manipulate for your custom UI that you want to do. Similarly, for like custom multi-child layout, where you can customize. Let's say you're in this UI, there's a lot of like different children or the different widgets that you want to show. You can actually control, like let's say there's 4 items inside this UI. How you want to show? You want to show 2 by 2, or you want to show like 1 by 1, or you want to show in any way that you want to show. So you can control that using this kind of widgets that can customize to the extent that is suitable for a use case. Okay, so in terms of the web, Flutter actually developed, you actually understand what is you actually know that there's such technology called progressive web app, where they would, so this is a technology where you can actually launch an app like a web, but it's not, and the user don't need to actually download the app. So it's a web browser, web app, web that is able to run on web browser. So in terms of PDA, progressive web app, Flutter actually have inbuilt. They actually built it inbuilt together with the framework. So it's actually supported natively. So you don't need to actually, like, if you need to have use case on like the build for progressive web app along with the native app, you can do so. So in terms of the SEO, you can actually do a basic kind of SEO because Flutter actually have one HTML file, which is index.html. So you can do the usual kind of SEO that you want to do, and you can actually, and at the end of the day, when Flutter actually compile it to web, they will compile into JavaScript, which is the main.js. So this is the part where all your logic that you built for your Flutter web is all here. And if you're actually building for your PWA, then you can actually use manifest.json to actually configure your all the metadata that you need for user to see. So the next thing that what Flutter actually can do is actually quite a lot of stuff. I mean, it can build almost everything. But having said that, there's actually some things that you may not be able to do, especially where this is actually quite early stage. So there are some parts may not able to support. For example, maybe for virtual reality, you may need to actually use existing kind of native, maybe for using AR Core for Android, for example, that co-work with a Flutter web if you actually need to support for that. The good thing about Flutter is that you can actually use this. You can actually, like, what I mean is that you can develop Flutter web on an existing code base. For example, if your current code base is iOS, you can actually build Flutter. That means maybe there's some parts where you want to build a new UI. You can actually use Flutter web. You can actually use Flutter to actually develop alongside with the native code. So if it's an iOS app, then you can actually build together. And once you combine these together, it will still run as per normal. Just that because at the end of the day, Flutter will actually compile it to a native kind of app. So this will actually quite good in terms of the things. Okay. Okay, so in terms of what you can do for Flutter, especially for web, you can access to all the browser API. They actually have a package that is supported natively by Flutter. So this actually you can actually access to camera, geolocation, network, and also the storage. So for JavaScript, for this case, you can actually write JavaScript within the Dart to actually access maybe there's some things that you can like for this case you can actually use JavaScript to actually access browser API. But of course, the main thing about using JavaScript within that is usually people use this for like if they need to actually integrate with an SDK and they don't have Flutter SDK, they only have like JavaScript SDK for web. Then what you can do is you can use this GS object kind of like JavaScript package to actually connect the SDK with your Flutter web. In this case, then you can actually interact and to call the API from the SDK accordingly. So this is actually one way to actually do, let's say if you need to integrate a third-party services, you can do so using this JavaScript within that. Okay, the last thing that I will share, it is what you cannot do on Flutter web, especially in production that is quite most of the time, this is actually what you should keep in mind. Let's say you're considering using Flutter. The last thing is the like in terms of SEO, because Flutter is actually a single page application, and because it's a single page, then it's actually impossible to actually support a page level SEO where Google or search engine will crawl to the website and pick up all the data that is required for the search results. So Flutter is not good, it's not ready for that. Okay, so why this is that? Because Flutter is actually compile all the app that you built, all the code base that you built, and you compile it into one. So with that, then there's no way that even for like other framework like React Native, they also do the similar stuff where they combine this together. Then ideally, this is not good for is not good for a website that require SEO or need to be optimized for that. Then Flutter is not actually not a good choice for that kind of use case. So as you can see from these comments, it's actually quite ideal for like Flutter is actually quite ideal for building backend apps or maybe internet apps or admin panel or maybe mobile and iOS app that actually require to run for in the browser lah. I mean, this is actually what this is actually applicable for Flutter web. Of course, iOS and Android, there's no issue of SEO lah, because SEO is more for web application. So iOS, Android has no issue because at the end of the day, you will compile it into iOS and Android, then you will be optimized within the App Store or the Google Play Store. So the next thing that what it cannot do for Flutter, especially the Flutter web, is because like if you need to actually integrate with third party like Stripe, then you may need to do workaround because they usually don't have native support for Flutter. Then you need to actually you actually need to actually do workaround. So for example, in our company, we actually need to use Stripe for our payment system. So what we do is we actually use like you can see on this UI, this is actually not Flutter. This is actually a HTML file. There's actually powered with CSS and JavaScript, but the rest of the UI is Flutter. So what we do is actually we use the JavaScript SDK that's provided by Stripe. Let me show you the Stripe SDK. So Stripe for web application to integrate with Stripe, you have to use like Stripe Elements, which is a JS kind of SDK, and this is actually what they provide. So in our case, we actually use the same framework, same SDK, just that we wrap around. That means we actually use iframe to actually wrap around to actually allow to display the HTML on Flutter. So this is actually kind of a workaround. Let's say if you actually require to build Flutter web for like you need to integrate with Flutter web, then you need to find workaround to actually integrate. So if you think that this is actually not good, then then this is not, then Flutter is actually not a good framework for your use case. So if you need to have a third-party integration that don't have Flutter support, or there's no way to actually integrate using Flutter with their third-party SDK, then Flutter is not a good use case for this. So lastly, as Flutter actually like compile the UI natively, so when they actually from your code in Dart, you actually will compile that into a native iOS IPA compile, or maybe IO. For Android is the APK, but for web is you convert into a JavaScript file. So with that, then they do not allow you to actually manipulate, like you want to add a CSS tag to the HTML element, is not possible. So this is actually quite hard to actually do that. And because they actually because Flutter actually manipulate the whole entire UI, or they actually own every pixel in the UI, which they control everything in that. So there's no way to actually, if you want to override the how Flutter actually manipulate the widgets or the HTML element for web. Yeah, so this is actually not possible. So even if there's a use case for this, then then this is not advisable for that. Okay, so this is actually what the things that I will share so far as a nutshell. So let me do a quick recap. So I've shared the Flutter in a nutshell. So hopefully you can understand like what are the trends, and also the what is Flutter all about, and also the demo, some of the use case for iOS, Android, and web, and also to actually showcase what are the things that you can do and you cannot do in productions. So so at the end of the day, Flutter is actually what it built is actually for cross-platform framework. So at the end of the day, this is actually what Flutter is all about, is to build a high quality of mobile application for cross-platform framework. And this is actually their main goal. And of course, their bigger dream is actually to create a kind of like one code base it can deploy to all the platform that is supported. So this is actually kind of like a Thanos kind of a like all the infinity stones, like all the framework, and just use one God, and you can actually just snap a finger and you can deploy to all with using the same code base without the need to actually recode the same UI or the same features for your mobile app in other platform. So hopefully my talks is able to actually help you to actually understand, and hopefully able to flutter in your hearts as a Flutter framework. So this is actually the end of my talk. So if any questions, feel free to actually reach out to me, or you can email me, contact me, and so forth. So this is actually my end of the talk. So feel free for any questions. Thank you so much.
All right, so I'm coming in. So thank you so much, Jason. Just stay. We have some questions. Let's start with the first question, right?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to remove the screen. Okay, cool. Okay, wait, is it showing? How's the development process like? Do you use any emulators? See how it renders across device type?
For that, does it use your emulator, and how does it render across different device type? I suppose you are referring to the iOS and Android emulator lah. So how is it? So usually what we do is actually I mean, we actually just pop out. If we actually need to actually test Android or iOS, then just you pop out emulator or use a real device lah. Then if you need to have to test whether you want to see whether this device, maybe an iPad for example, then either use the emulator provided by Xcode or Android Studio, and just need to pop up the version and just pump the or just compile the code into the emulator. So usually what if we're talking about like your own development, but if we're talking about the like if CI/CD continuous integration, then of course you may need to use like there's actually a services called Code Magic where you can actually test different devices type and at scale. So that means you will simultaneously test different UI according whether it fit into that design. So this is actually what normally what we do lah. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think you answered very well. Okay, and gonna hide that one. I added Yongsheng as well. She's back. You are on mute, by the way, Yongsheng. All right.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions for you, right? So how about you already talked about Flutter everything, how you say like octopus everything. Like, how about the deployment part? Like, how easy compared to other React Native, or like even since you already have a desktop as well and a web page as well for on based on Flutter with the same code base. How the deployment compared to the other? I mean, you just have to write one code base, but is the deployment going to be tricky though? Like, or is it going to be like easy as how it is now?
So for that, of course, in if we're talking about like if we don't use like services for like a continuous integration, then if let's say you want to deploy just based on your laptop or your MacBook, then of course it will be tedious lah because you have to open your Visual Studio Code or your Android Studio and you have to compile, export into iOS, Android one by one. Then but that is actually not scalable if let's say I actually need to deploy a lot of apps at one go. So usually people will do like there's actually a service called Code Magic, which is actually a continuous integration kind of CI/CD tool that you can use this to actually deploy into multiple. Let's say you need to deploy into iOS, Android, and web. You can select what export or what device you want to actually export, and just need to fit into this CI/CD service. You actually will do the okay. You may need to actually do like unit testing, and also need to do that in this process. You can actually pipe that processes, deployment processes with testing using this service lah. So this is actually what people do. Let's say you need to deploy to multiple devices or you have multiple apps, like not just one apps. Because if one apps, you want to divide to 4 platform, and yes, maybe your company has 10 application, then you need to deploy to quite a lot of devices. If you multiply
Yep.
if you do the math, it's quite a hectic kind of process. You cannot possibly do in
Tedious.
one.
Yep.
It's quite tedious. It's very tedious. So especially then, like I mean, the good thing is you can drink your coffee lah. I mean, like when it's deploying, your desktop is been full, quite busy, and you can drink your coffee lah. I mean, if you've been deploying one app, then I think this is okay lah. But if you actually deploy a very large volume of application, then you
Yep.
need to use this kind of service lah.
So I have a question. Like, is it showing? Yep. What CI/CD solution do you like or use in production? So it's pretty much answer the question, right? Code Magic, right?
Yes, Code Magic is actually the Code Magic exists. They actually appeared. They actually like developed that kind of solution just for Flutter at the start. But I think so later they may support for other framework. But so far I see they only provide support for Flutter. So
It's
this is
specific for
actually
Flutter.
correct. But of course, there's actually other CI/CD which you can use lah. So in the past, actually we use like Bitrise. There's actually a solution called Bitrise or like Traverse, other CI/CD. There's actually a kind of like a recipe or the on GitHub where you can actually use. Let's say if your company already use an existing CI/CD tool, then maybe use the existing one. Find some open source in GitHub. Whether do they have some kind of like someone should really because there's some other developers actually use existing CI/CD and they're using Flutter Web, they are using Flutter app, they are building Flutter app. Then so they actually create their own recipe for CI/CD for their own CI/CD tool. So that is actually quite convenient. I just need to find whether there's other developers that done that. But having said that,
Yep.
if you talk about a new application or your new pipeline, then maybe Code Magic can give it a try. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, it all depends on how you write your YAML file, and also if you want a shortcut,
Yes.
use Code Magic.
Yeah, but it's not cheap lah. I mean, at the wrong one.
Yep. I mean, it's always a paid one is the tricky one, right? So one more question. What about more complex application on mobile? For example, image editing apps or podcast app with transcription. I think Flutter handles it, right? But you just need to rely more on the Google side of the Firebase and stuff.
depends.
You'd
I mean,
expect.
yeah. I mean, complex wise, depends how complex that you're trying to refer lah. But if we're talking about image editing, it's actually I do see some project that is built in Flutter for image editing app. Podcast app with transcription, that not issue as long as you use either API or you embed a model. Let's say like you have train your own model and embed it into your device, into your app, then it's, it's not an issue in terms of performance. But of course, I mean, if you use an online version of the API for transcriptions, like transcribe a language to another language and use the API, then there will be lag. I mean, because there's a network traffic, there's a network call. So regardless of which framework you use, will be roughly the same. So for complex apps, I think there's no issue, especially for iOS and Android. Web-wise, for web application, I would say not there yet for the complex.
It's not recommended.
Yeah, I tried that because we actually built an internal tool for our own admin. We have a very large data. This is admin tool, desktop tool, like a desktop admin dashboard. We actually have a large data being loaded. Then you actually load quite slowly. The more data you have need to load on a single screen,
then slower it goes.
Yes, so that's for web application, not about the mobile app. So this is a web. So because it's in beta, so I understand this is actually the beta wise. When they say beta, means that there's actually some performance issue which had to iron out. But having said that, it's still workable. I mean, it's still able to navigate, still able to complete the task. Yeah.
Okay. And okay, let me hide the question. Okay, I think so bring out any question we have, and then I will just post asking any question that you guys have. Another one is right. I have how about the development speed compared to React Native and Flutter? Because I don't want to compare with Native. Native is obviously that's the sacrifice you have to do to get the performance comes with Native. But how about hybrid compared to React Native? I can't talk about Ionic or or PhoneGap, because PhoneGap is already the pacing out, so it's pretty much no more. So I don't. So just
Actually,
Native.
Yeah, actually, my first mobile framework is PhoneGap, using HTML. Using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Before the time where React Native is being developed So that one is actually quite in terms of performance, it's kind of quite bad. It's really, really bad.
Yep.
I mean, I try to run a large, like a table field to show a lot of data. It actually crashed.
Yeah.
So in terms of that,
it's crash always
it's crash always. Yes. I mean, it's actually because the technology framework PhoneGap is actually make use of whatever the web view or the web browser
correct
that is
HTML
on your phone. That's on your phone. So they cannot handle. There's a maximum RAM or the space that it can actually load. So especially you're running application on top of this web browser on your phone, it will add a lot of pressure on that. So of course it will crash at some point in time. But if we talk about comparison in terms of development time, of course, whether you're using Flutter, you're using React Native, the development time is actually quite promising. I mean, that's actually about the same kind of thing. But the only thing about Flutter compared to React Native or React, you can see that React and React Native, they call two different frameworks. So that means that they actually have there's some code base that is shared between React and React Native. But having said that, they say that in the two different frameworks, you can see that they are actually you will have two code base at the end of the day. Yeah. So this is actually what with some level of, that means maybe about 30 to 40 or 50% of the code base can be shared between React and React Native. So in the past, I actually create React and React Native. Actually, need to actually because there's some UI cannot render on iOS or Android because it's for web. So then you have to put it in a separate folder. Then for iOS, you cannot run it on the web. So this is actually a problem. Then you need to have a separate folder or separate repo. But for Flutter, it's actually automatic. all I need to do is actually say that, like, if this code base, like this, so UI you want to run for web, then just need to have a flag say that this actually, if you are running for web, show this. You're running for the iOS, you will show this. You can do that to separate, but the code base is the same, one code base. So in terms of that, the development time is speed up because you don't need to manage so much of the different like platform for different code base, and you will still maintain one code base as much as possible. So that's actually what Flutter is trying to all about. I mean, it's trying to make one code base as smart as possible. Maybe not 100%, but maybe I would say maybe 80 to 90%.
Almost
Try
there,
to
almost there.
almost there, almost there. I won't
Yep.
think I won't from my opinion, you will not go 100%. I don't think no other framework, even Flutter, will not go 100%. Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
100%, it'd be the perfect application out there already.
No, unless every technology company design on one framework, united framework, maybe united
Correct.
language, one framework, then of course you will be 100%. But having said that, there's so much apps, so much company have their own kind of a framework. You will never reach 100%. Yeah.
Correct. Especially a bigger company. So the time is 9:10. So actually we overrun by 10 minutes. So with that, right, I just have one last question for you. Flutter is by Google. So every great things that Google creates, they always come to an end one day if it doesn't perform well. So do you think we're happy to say with Flutter if Flutter's go down the road?
Good question. I also asked as well quite because I mean Flutter has been known for that quite a lot of application framework
Mm.
that is all go to their graveyard. So their graveyard have a lot of apps have been like a lot of apps have been going to the graveyard with the Google graveyard. So but
Yep.
I think for Flutter, I don't think they will go to graveyard for one key reason because they're using it as well. So I mean they're using it and the community is using it, and if they're eating their own dog food,
Mm.
their own framework, their own product, and that's the main reason they will support it. Because if they don't support it, then how to support their own like product that they have been built on top of Flutter. So as long as Google use it for themselves, then that is actually a good indicator that Flutter will be continue supporting. I think there's especially nowadays there's a base spike. You can see evidence from Stack Overflow. You can see evidence
Yep.
from like the
I mean, to put it in a
yeah.
very simple way, right? It's like a Go, right? Go is started by Google as well. But
Yeah.
I mean, it started from there, now it's there. So I mean, we can pretty much say Flutter probably going to be that way, even there, and then open source probably take over. The main reason actually I asked that question is some people have a like second doubt because it's Google. Like I will probably doing it, but then suddenly Google decided to shut it down, and then there's no more opportunity or nothing to like beyond than that. Like it just stuck. That's what some people are afraid of. Like, oh, I jump into the Flutter and try to use Flutter.
Yeah. So just to add one more point,
Mm.
if you actually not if your backend is not using Google Cloud, they actually have actually there's official support for like if you want to integrate with AWS with Flutter, they actually have a I think the Amazon team
Everfly,
actually they actually
they
have an
have they
official
announced it.
they announced it recently. So I think because when even Amazon is coming into this framework, I think as long as a lot of technology company like Google, maybe Microsoft, and even I think more recently back you want to invested. I think there's one. I think the parent company of Ubuntu, they actually invested in Flutter as well in terms of money. So you can see that, and because they want to enable support for Linux development, so I
Correct.
think you can see that so many companies is trying to like to hold hand with Flutter. I think that is a good sign that I think he will not go to graveyard, because the moment you go to graveyard, I think all the company will like, oh, hey, why you actually go to graveyard? So many
And
people
there's
Correct.
are
Alibaba.
using.
So there's Alibaba. They also built a few apps with Flutter. So yeah, like even China is joining the whole party. Yeah, it's unlikely lah for Flutter to just go into the graveyard like that with all the hype and the popularity that's gaining now.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with
I
you.
actually have two more questions just came in.
Oh,
So
okay.
just to let's finish up. I mean, okay, you mentioned a bit of PWA versus Flutter earlier. Any thoughts on ideal scenario where one works better than other? To us, from my side, my personal experience, PWA sometimes sucks performance-wise. So, but compared to Flutter, I like him to answer it.
Okay, because Flutter, the framework actually natively built in with PWA. If let's say you want to compile your Flutter app into a website, you can actually opt for option to have a PWA. Just need to configure the right configuration. Like you need to configure the manifest.json and you have to set the service worker. Once you've done that, you can deploy a Flutter web app like a PWA. So it actually works lah. But of course, Flutter web is still in beta, so there's some where I tried that to push a Flutter web in PWA format. It's actually working, but there's some performance issue. There's some issue had to iron out before actually using it for production because people have some user complaining about like because the only thing that is holding back is actually we actually when you need to update the let's say you have to make changes to the website, then the PWA actually cache your the all your most of the assets and so on. Let's say you want to change the images to a new images. Those people who use PWA, they cannot receive the images changes because it's being cached. So you need to actually do something to the service worker to actually trigger invalidate the cache and re-trigger.
Mm.
So there's some issue in that which I have users that actually unable to see the changes. There's some issue on that in production. So it's not
Ready yet?
advisable to use. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you want to use it for personal projects, like for your own portfolio, and all means you can do that. I think it's working. Just that there's some performance issue that had to iron out.
Just to play around and have some fun and then like
Yes.
brush up your skill or something, right? Okay, sis, one last question. Like actually, this is a good question. I let Yongsheng and both Jason to answer this. What are the job opportunities like with Flutter for a fresh grad looking to get into mobile app development? So, you want to go first, Jason?
Okay. So for job opportunity, unfortunately, is still early framework. So adoption is not as because like for framework like they have been around more like I think 2013 or 2012 they have been there already. So then of course companies already built their mobile apps on React Native or React many years ago. So and they just need to build more features upon that. So those companies they have issues provide this kind of opportunity for Flutter. So there's so if you are looking for big companies like they actually and most of the time they will not have Flutter app lah. But we're talking about smaller company or maybe a new application. They usually will have Flutter. Uh, they
Hmm.
usually build with Flutter. I've seen a lot of companies that a new company or a new startup they actually use Flutter as the option. Then the opportunity is there. But if you're talking about other bigger companies where they have been built the mobile apps or their web app on other framework many years ago, then the opportunity is not there yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of the opportunity for job opportunity is not, I think maybe less than 10% in the world market. Yeah. But having said that, I know that India and China is the biggest like
User.
adoption, biggest user or biggest developer in Flutter. That's what I know. So these two markets has a lot of Flutter developers and opportunity
It's a
wise,
sign basically.
correct, correct. So in terms of that then both of these countries actually have a lot of opportunity. It's growing, but it's not as significant as compared to other framework. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a very good way to put it. So Yongsheng, you wanna go next?
But I think in Malaysia actually is also growing quite fast because like from LinkedIn itself lah, if you go to the jobs page, you can see there are more and more job advertisement on hiring Flutter developers already. Like they even accept fresh grads as long as like you know how to use Flutter to build basic apps, which is quite easy lah because like is it's very easy to pick up Dart, even though Dart to me essentially is like a combination of JavaScript plus OOP, so it's more on like a strongly typed JavaScript lah to me. But in the end, it's still quite easy to learn, and then the job opportunities out there are actually growing, even in Malaysia. So yeah, I think for fresh grad, we can definitely start looking into learning Flutter if you want to go into the mobile app development thing. Yeah.
Correct. So for my side, I just say Flutter is a fresh grad, it's still new. So for like 10 years, 5 years for Flutter. So if you're fresh, you start with Flutter, I think it's a good start for you, your career as of like one of the early adopter and stuff. And yeah, so we pretty much came to the end. We pretty much overrun like a couple of minutes. So let's thank you guys for coming and joining us. Conversation, have a very good questions coming up, everything. So as usual, like let us know if any you guys have any questions or and oops, sorry, remove them accidentally. So if any question you guys have, just let us know. Find Yongsheng to face or Google her, you will figure out. And thank you so much to Jason for spending his time and like his input and letting know what is about Flutter is about and like whether you should, what you can learn. So I hope it's useful for you guys. And yep, thank you so much and good night. And do you guys want to add anything else? Just don't leave. I will end the podcast, but don't leave.
Okay, thank you for spending 1 hour, I think almost 1 hour plus to listen to my talk. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
And Yongsheng?
No, so I think what you can do is to follow our meetup. We will keep some more events coming. Hopefully, we try to do it regularly, despite the coronavirus thing. So yeah, and then when we have a couple more events coming up, then we will announce it in the page. So yeah, stay tuned.
Okay, thanks, guys. So good night. Have a good weekend. No, good week. So I'm still in weekend mode. So yeah.